listening to the media of World Outreach Church in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We endeavor to communicate the timeless truths of Christianity in a relevant way to our changing world. Here at World Outreach, we are committed to helping people become more fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. For more information, visit our website at www.wochurch.org.
Many of you have never heard Ronny Simone make a presentation. Oh, well, have you ever had a drink from a fire hydrant? It's a very similar experience. I met Ronny. It was unplanned. He was simply scheduled to be a tour guide for us with one of our tours, as I said, more than 10 years ago. And seemingly by chance, we were put together. But I'm very grateful to say over the time that has passed, he has become a good friend. And I have been studying Israel and the land of Israel and the Jewish people and the history of the Near East, both modern and ancient, for some time. At Hebrew University, Vanderbilt, and in many wonderful locations. But I've never had a professor or a faculty member or a learning opportunity that was any greater than what Ronny represents. His understanding of the topic, he has lived through the modern history part of that. His respect for the Word of God, and his willingness to help process the information to make it easily accessible to the general public is truly a remarkable gift. And this was an unexpected trip, but it is my great privilege to introduce to you a friend of World Outreach, Ronny Simone.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I always have to apologize for my accent. That's always number one, especially for those of you that didn't hear me so far. It's English, what you hear. It will take you a while to get used to that, and I'll do my best to slow down because there is a message I would like to convey to you this evening. I want to thank Pastor Allen for the opportunity, not my first time, to speak to Friends of Israel. And each time I come, and you think that everything was said and done, nothing new to tell you, there's always something new. And things are not getting any better, unfortunately. They're getting definitely worse. I'm going to dedicate this evening to speak about two main things. Number one, we'll speak about the Middle East in a more broader way. We'll try to touch on the key issues in the area. And the second part, we'll zoom in to speak about Israel and the Palestinians. And we'll say a few words about the last conflict in Gaza, which I'm sure that all of you heard about. You know, in about 100 years or so, historians are going to examine our era, try to understand what happened, and they will nod their heads and will say, the leaders of the world in the early 21st century did not learn history, because they repeated the same mistakes that the leaders of the world in the early 20th century had made. And you'll see in just a minute what I mean. We live in times of so much confusion. We live in times that leaders of the world trying to understand what is the right thing to do. 3 years, maybe 3 years too late, the American administration is finally stepping in. Europe is getting a little scared about what is going on, and everybody asks one question that nobody knows how to answer. Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Who are we going to support? Are we going to make the same mistake supporting the wrong side as we did in the past? What on earth is going on? Let me give you the bottom line. Some situations don't have a solution. It's our obligation to do our best to find a solution for the sake of saving lives, for the sake of protecting ourselves. It's a war that goes on. But sometimes we have to admit, as clever as we are, as determined as we are, some situations don't have a solution. If I'd asked you until about 2-3 years ago when I say, or when we say, peace in the Middle East, what are we talking about? The answer would be peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors, right? Because everybody has the opinion that the main source of problems in the area is the state of Israel. If there was no Israel, the Middle East would be a place of tranquility, prosperity, freedom, human rights, and you go down the list. I had the pleasure to share with many people in many places, and when I asked the question, how many of you believe that without the state of Israel, the Middle East would be a safer place, many people rose their hands. I think that we begin to understand that if anything, Israel is part of the solution, not part of the problem. And how? Thank you. And to make it even better or worse, all depends on your opinion, in the midst of all the turmoil, in the midst of all the massacres and the bloodshed where Muslims are brutally massacring Muslims, there is one island of peace, an island of prosperity and tranquility called the State of Israel. How frustrating to the Arab world. And let me start with the end, the bottom line, okay? When we speak about the State of Israel, with all the confusion, few things are not going to change. Few things are to be taken for granted, and it all are the outcomes of the spirit of Islam and what people are willing to do in behalf of Islam. I will not speak against the Muslim faith. I'm not a theologian. I do not know the details. But I do know what people are willing to do in behalf of Islam, and that's enough for me. Religions are what you made out of them. And if people are willing to cut the throats of anybody who doesn't think exactly like them, including fellow Muslims, that's all I need to know about the Muslim faith. So when you look around and you see how people treat each other in the Middle East, so far, Muslims butchering Muslims, that's bad news. And suddenly everybody is interested. For a long time, unfortunately, the world wasn't the opinion. It happens far away. It's a limited geographical issue. We are not affected by it. You were wrong. And not just after 9/11. The signs were there. You live in Israel, you're not surprised. You know what happens. So this evening I would like to bring you a little bit of the locals' perspective. And since I'm not American, I'm not going to be too politically correct, if that's okay with you. All right, I'll take the liberty not to. Thank you again. Because it's about time to call the things as they are. When you say peace, when you say freedom, when you speak about human rights, when you speak about victory, what exactly are we talking about? Translation from one language to another, sometimes you're missing the main point. And therefore, the words are important. So tonight, it's going to be a challenge for you all because a lot of information will come up and down on the screen. I mean, a lot of information. Don't even bother to try to read everything. You can't. And I'm not very disciplined as a speaker. I'm not going to stick to the notes behind me or in front of me. I'm going to take side tracks, using my hands all the time. That's how we speak anyhow. All right, so you do have a challenge. Get used to my accent. Try to follow what's written on the screens. But if you can, please don't feel frustrated. There was a lot of information. Let us begin. Because when we say let us begin, we do need to understand the Middle East today. We need to understand the making of the Middle East today in order to understand the problem. And the most important thing, what may happen in the future. When President Obama is representing his strategy, how to fight ISIS and all the others, what I want to hear is what's next. What's the objective? Let's say that we killed every ISIS militant in the Middle East. Now what? Are we going to rearrange the region? Are we going to create countries and nations? Are we going to repeat the same mistakes that politicians did a century ago? Because it's not enough to take out one group. What about the other hundreds of groups in the area with the very same agenda? What do we do with them? And therefore to say we're going to uproot ISIS, well, it sounds like a plan, but a very small part of it. There's a lot more on the table, and the idea is not just to finish the ground operation. Winning the war in Iraq was easy, right? Remember? The problem was later, what happened later. So it's not taking out one group or the other. How does the West see the Middle East? And by the way, why is it our problem? Why are we going to go back to this area and tell people how we think they should live their lives? Forgive me for saying that, but as long as they kill each other, That's not nice to say. What do we care? Well, I'm saying that as a provocative question, but there was a point to it. Because each time the West was trying to get involved, to advise the people over there what shall be done, it happened to be very wrong. We bring our ideas, we bring our noble ideas to people that maybe are not interested. And by the way, who said that democracy is the form of government that every nation on earth, every people on earth need? Some people prevail in lawlessness. Some people want to live under oppression. You tell me why anybody in his right mind will vote a party in free elections in January of 2006. I'm talking about the elections in the Palestinian side when Hamas was elected. Why would anybody elect a party that guarantees in their agenda and platform poverty, ignorance, everlasting conflict, bloodshed? Would you elect such a party to run your lives? You see, I can explain history. We can bring the facts to the table, that's easy. How do you convey a mindset? How do you try to explain to people that some people don't think the same way as we do? And what if the idea of freedom is not how we understand freedom? What if the way that I see my freedom is to take you out? Do you like me to have such freedom? So we speak about something very complicated on many levels. The history part is the easy one to understand. The complicated one is to try to bring to the table a set of values that we are not familiar with, which is a good thing, by the way. But if we try to understand the Middle East based on academic studies, no way. If the people that advise leaders of the world about the Middle East are making their advisors because to their academic studies, they don't understand nothing about the Middle East. And it's not easy. Well, let's see how successful I can get. Number one, the Middle East is changing. When you go back home, open the atlases and simply erase from the map countries like Syria, doesn't exist anymore. Countries like Iraq, history. Libya is disintegrating. Questions about Lebanon, Jordan. We are making history right now, maybe in a negative way. But arrangements that were holding on for about a century are disintegrating as we speak. But we need to understand how the Middle East was created in order to understand the problem. Let me take you back to the aftermath of the First World War. And you see a map over there, and this is the map of the Middle East. If you look carefully, you will not see countries. You will not see Syria. There is no Lebanon. There is no Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, the Arab Emirates, Kuwait. They don't exist. In other words, these countries were only created after the war was over. The Middle East was part of the Ottoman Empire, that's modern-day Turkey. It wasn't divided to countries or to nationalities. Nobody thought in national terms. You need to understand that to speak about nations in the Arab world, the Muslim world, defeats the purpose of Islam. Islam as a religion does not believe in nationalities. All Muslims should live together under one authority, a caliphate, and that should be a theocracy and not Muslim countries. So the Muslim idea was not to let's arrange in states and countries. That was something that happened against their will. Who won the First World War? You know the answer. But let me tell you the right terminology and not the one that we all read in history books. The books are telling us that France and United Kingdom and the US won the war against Germany, Austro-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. Let me tell you how they understand it. They understand it that the Ottoman Empire that represented the Muslim world back then was defeated by the Christians, not by the British or the French or the Americans. Islam suffered the most crushing defeat from Christians like never before. That's the right perspective. That's what we need to understand. What we see today, it's payback time. Because Islam is not teaching that Muslims will be humiliated by Christians. Islam teaches that Islam is winning. Islam is supposed to have victory. How do you explain? In your own scriptures, what happened? And therefore, the motivation on the other side to restore the greatness of Islam is what basically motivates most people in the region. Only recently, the new president, the former prime minister of Turkey, Erdogan, said very clearly he would like to see the restoration of the Ottoman Empire. You know what? Not a bad idea. Let him deal with all the unrest in the Middle East in his territory. Not a bad idea. I'm not a great advocate of Turkey in that regard, but you need to think outside the box. Maybe that's one way to think about what may be future solutions. So let's use now the right terminology. Islam was humiliated, Islam was defeated, and to add to the chaos, the European countries plus the US of A were rearranging, if you wish, the Middle East based on their principles. They found that countries, well, nobody wanted to be part of a nation in the Middle East. People live in tribes, people live in clans since biblical days. The national sentiment is strange to the people in the region. So how was the Middle East created? In a very bizarre way. It wasn't the will of the locals to be part of nations. The victors of the war, Winston Churchill, in that case, who was the colonial secretary back then, and was appointed by the British cabinet to somehow find a solution to the region so the Europeans can control the place easier, opened the map of the Middle East in his hotel room in Cairo, took a pencil, a roller, and marked lines in the desert, creating countries and nations for people that had nothing in common. Because if you live in that mountain over there with your clan, the clan that lives on the next mountain is not your friend. You fight for the same source of water, you fight for the same grazing grounds. And now the Christian countries very arrogantly try to force us to live together as a nation. We are not interested, but hey, we lost the war, they won, we don't have that many options. The Middle East, until this very day, these are people's loyalties and sentiments is to your clan, to your extended family, and not to a nation. You tell me why an Iraqi soldier will fight against his own family that happens to be a clan member. What will be his motivation? The nation of Iraq offers him absolutely nothing. Why would he risk his life to fight for something that fights against his own family? Same in Syria, same in many countries in the Middle East. So once we understand the making of the Middle East, I think that you don't have to be super intelligent to understand that once you want to bring democracy to the region, you get chaos. Because when you give people the right to vote, now what do you think they're going to vote for? Every clan has a party, every party has a militia, every militia is armed to their teeth. And what they do day and night is kill each other. I'm not exaggerating. I'll try not to be biased. When I be biased, I have a bias sign. I'll do like that in order to being biased. But once again, we need to understand the facts. We have to choose. And once again, what say do we have? But we have to choose. If we want democracy in the Middle East, you get chaos. If you want stability, you need to have dictatorships. As much as we hate the system, as long as the Middle East was ruled by dictators, it was much more quiet, much more stable. Somebody had something to lose. Of course, we hate this whole form of government, but we have to be honest about it. At least the Middle East was more stable. When a brutal ruler like Saddam Hussein ruled over Iraq, what do we prefer? Kind of a semi-democracy as we see now? Do we really enjoy that? Where people are getting killed by their hundreds every day? Or maybe one brutal ruler, but at least we have somebody to talk to. Somebody is running the show. Somebody has something to lose. Right now, it's chaos. And I'm not criticizing America's policy. It's not my job. Every president has the right to try something new, what is best for America. The question is, if it's not really working, what does it take to admit to say, well, I tried something, it doesn't work, what are we going to do now? Let's carry on. Here is the Middle East today, but once again, some of these countries are no longer there. There still is a central government in Iraq, but they control absolutely nothing. Syria, very little. We do speak about a place of much chaos. After the Arab countries were formed and created, it wasn't all quiet. They started as monarchies. They started as dictatorships. There were some revolutions in places. you see, the idea was that if we succeeded to develop some national sentiments and the states will work as national entities, we can improve our way of life. We are going to be like the Europeans. It's going to add to stability, prosperity. It didn't work. So they tried democracy, that was chaos. They tried dictatorships, that didn't work either. There's one thing that the Arab countries did not try yet. They did not try yet as nations and states to live as a Muslim theocracy under Sharia law. And some people said, hey, Islam should be the answer. Let's give it a shot. That may work. So when the Arab Spring started, who invented this stupid term? Forgive me, I'm not even sure. But when the Arab Spring started, maybe we should call it the Muslim freezing winter, but we'll speak about the Arab Spring. That was the beginning of the idea. And we were really happy to see that. Finally, the Arab nations are rebelling. They want to fight for their rights. There were so many hopes that something is going to change. By the way, the first time that Arabs were voting freely in the Middle East was in the elections of the Palestinians when Hamas was elected in January 2006. So if you need to point a finger to say when the spring started, that was in 2006. Let me also submit to you, which is quite embarrassing, just a map to show you with all these places. You see the little blue dot in the center? Israel. We live in a tough neighborhood, huh? You do understand the problem. Once again, an island of tranquility, prosperity. Many of you have been to the country. Under all the tension in the Middle East, you felt safe. Everything was great. Let me try to explain, and once again, we may be dead wrong in that regard as well. Do we really understand what we see? It started with people rebelling against the regimes, and we were happy to see that finally the Arab people want their freedom. Maybe not fully understanding what does freedom in that sense means. Because if the alternative to the Arab dictatorships is a Sharia law state, that means that you have the obligation to take everybody else out. It's not advocating peace. It's not advocating human rights. And we were so content. Finally, they fight for their rights without really understanding what are these rights. Once again, if you try to approach the Middle East by using an American healthy, logical common sense, you miss the point. The Middle East and common sense are not good friends, never were. Nothing in the region works on common sense. Sentiments, religious feelings, fanaticism, it's a whole different understanding. I live there, and I do not understand it fully either, because I want to believe that the two of us are sharing the same Judeo-Christian principles, which are so different to the Muslim principles, which is a good thing, by the way. And therefore, we thought that, well, maybe what we see basically is a big struggle within Islam between the Sunnis and the Shiites. You know how we call the war between the Sunnis and the Shiites over there? I take full credit for a joke which my colleague of mine told me, Ilan, you know him, we call it the sushi war. Sunnis against Shiite. But at least it describes some of the idea. Apparently, right now, that's exactly what it is. For the last few years, what we see is Sunnis and Shiites, and Sunnis and Sunnis, and Shiites and Sunnis, and you name it, fighting against each other. For what exactly? It's not very clear. And you can mention any name you want. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, ISIL, Jabhat al-Nusra, Shabab al-Islam, Boko, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is very much the same. The motivation is very much the same. The question is how to get there, and each one has a way to get there. But what we see right now is within the Muslim world, the Sunnis and the Shiites are fighting against each other. Now the Sunnis make a big majority. The Sunnis make about 80 to 85% of the Muslim world. And not to make it too complicated, please make a distinction between Arabs and Muslims, not the same. The term Arab is indicating not a religion, not an ethnicity, and not a nationality. Arab is a civilization. It's a language. It's a way of life. You can be Arab by your culture, who are a citizen of Jordan or Syria or Egypt, and you can practice the Christian faith or the Muslim faith. Identity issues in the Middle East are not easy to understand. And therefore we speak about a war between the two main groups. Interesting, the two most powerful groups, Turkey and Iran, are not Arabs, but they are Muslims. Indonesia, not Arab, but Muslim. Most of the Muslims around the world are not from the Arab civilization. Malaysia, Indonesia, Nigeria, Turkey, Iran, you name it. Or Kazakhstan and all the others, all the stans. All right, now this is important to know that distinction. Right now, that's what it looks like. Or maybe what we see is going back to the ancient historical conflict of Turkey on one side and Persia, Iran on the other side. These two superpowers were massive and important civilizations in the past. The Byzantines, the Ottomans, the Persians, maybe that's what we see. It's Muslims fighting Muslims. Most likely, although that may change as well. But the Arab countries are not a monolith. Every country has its own characteristics. Every country has its own problems. And I would like in a short time to go into each one of the 4 or 5 which are relevant, and just very briefly to touch on a few things. Let's start with Egypt. Then we'll speak a little bit about the role of the US and the West, so to speak, in what happens in the Middle East. Egypt was an ally of the US. In June of 2009, President Obama went to Cairo and addressed a lot of people that came to hear him in the Cairo University. The message was, and once again, it's a legitimate policy to have. The message was that America and the Muslim world are not enemies. They need to do something to reconcile. America is going to support moderate Muslims, and if there are militants among them, the US will support the moderates to fight the militants. That was the message. The problem is not what you are saying, is what the listeners understand. You go to Egypt, which was a strong ally of the US for many years. You don't go to address the government, you're going to address Muslim clerics, among other things, and you're telling them that the US is no longer supporting the regime necessarily. The agenda is now America versus Islam as a faith, and not necessarily as Muslim countries. I'm not saying that that was his intention. It's an opinion, all right? I'm saying that maybe people that were listening got the wrong message. That the US will not support any of those regimes anymore because the US wants to reconcile with the Muslims as a religion and to support the moderates. And who are the moderates in the view of the US? The Muslim Brotherhood. They are the moderates. America openly supports the Muslim Brotherhood, and once again, it's a legitimate policy to have, and the idea is, as stated by President Obama more than once, we need to recruit the moderates to our side to fight the militants. They're supposed to provide the boots on the ground, even now, to fight against ISIS. That was the idea. Was that the trigger for the Arab Spring? Time will tell. Was his intention? I don't think so. But that's what happened, basically. Within 24 hours, when the unrest in Egypt started, the US turned their backs to President Mubarak. We are no longer behind you. You are no longer an ally. And who you are supporting? The new power. And who happened to be the new power? Muslim Brotherhood. The problem is with Egypt, and now I'm bringing in the narrow Israeli selfish perspective, is that Egypt and Israel share a border. And this border is quite long, and we have peace with Egypt. And on the other side is the Sinai Peninsula, the same place that Moses led the Israelites for 40 years. Not a very pleasant place. And since the government of Egypt is not very strong, stable, it's not really controlling the Sinai. And who goes into Sinai? Every terror group in the world have bases in Sinai. And what do they do there? Not recreation. Accumulating weapons, and every now and then firing rockets at Israel. Not Palestinians from Gaza. Sinai. Well, here's a problem. Sinai is a sovereign part of Egypt. Now, from our perspective, we do have peace with the Egyptians. We know where these camps are, and we can take them out. But if we will, we are going to violate the sovereign territory of an independent state. The world will not tolerate that. You do sense some frustration in my voice already. These people are there to kill us. We can take them out, but if we'll do that, we'll be accused that we are violating the sovereign territory of Egypt. So we don't. We cooperate. The Egyptians also understand that this is becoming a real problem, so they started to operate as well. So just to zoom in just a minute, the next one should do that, and I'm going to skip some of those. Well, here is the Sinai Peninsula, and from Sinai into Israel, everybody can come in. Now, those groups in Sinai are a threat to the Egyptian regime. Now they're taking action finally. As long as only Israel was the victim, Egypt couldn't care less. But now they turn against the Egyptian regime because they are Muslim Brotherhood. Now they suddenly care. And they send the troops inside to try to uproot them. They don't do such a great job. So on our borders, that's problem number one. Officially, we are at peace with Egypt. They keep changing regimes over there. Nobody controls the Sinai Peninsula, and people that are threatening us and firing rockets, and we cannot take them out because we are not permitted to. And it's not just Egypt. Same with Syria, used to be with Jordan, same with Lebanon. We really try to play by the rules, as you understand. But we are the only one in the region that plays by the rules. All the others don't. Not very fair, huh? So Egypt is one, and the country went through a lot of problems. The Bedouins, by the way, in Sinai, they will work for anybody who pays. They have a very flexible ideology. It's called money. And they are very powerful. You can recruit them to your side to do whatever you want if you pay. We have Al-Qaeda bases over there. We have Al-Qaeda Egypt branch of Al-Qaeda over there. Reports about some ISIS, whatever these guys are exactly. It's a problem. We are not new to this because in the early 70s we had the same problem with Jordan. Jordan had a very weak regime back then, and the PLO was founded in a way and built their bases in Jordanian territory. You see, what terror really needs, and that's how they prosper, and unfortunately they have a lot of chances to do that. We'll get there in just a minute. What terror needs is a country which is protected by international law, with a very weak central government, so they can create their state within a state, the better, on Israel's borders. And that's what we see in countries around us. All of them right now are facing the same problem. Unrest, people move inside, build their bases, a state within a state that the central government doesn't control. And even if you want to retaliate, we have no reason yet. Not before they open fire, and even then. Now, just a minute now. Are you going to attack a sovereign country because they fired one rocket from territory? Yes! No. You cannot do that. It's a violation of international law. But nobody plays by these rules. Well, you should. And we play by the rules. After Mubarak was out of office, they had elections in Egypt. And you tell me, once again, why would 65% of the Egyptians will vote for the Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafists? Because they do not guarantee human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of occupation. They don't. They guarantee to rule by Sharia law, which means oppression, basically. Well, oppression is a very subjective word. For some people, oppression is other people's freedom. Well, go figure that out, huh? I'm free when I'm oppressed. It sounds almost like an Orwellian kind of saying, right? 1984. Doesn't make any sense. Well, it makes sense if you come from the right mindset. So the Morsi regime didn't last for too long, and another one came to power, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. By the way, the American view officially is that the Sisi regime is illegit because he was the commander of the Egyptian army. There was a coup. Clear cut, no question. And then he resigned from the army to be elected not as a general, but as a civilian. So they can convince the US and the West it wasn't a military move. But he outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood. They could not run in the elections, which means that 65% of Egyptians did not vote. So Egypt is not a democracy. It's a dictatorship. But my question should be, with all due respect, so what? At least the regime is stable. We have somebody to talk to who can deliver. If he's oppressing his own people, I'm very sorry. I don't care. It's not nice to say, I know. All I care, from my very selfish perspective, as somebody to work with on the other side, because we are not 10,000 miles away with the big ocean separating us. We are right there. So as far as I am concerned, let them oppress the people. Not very nice, I know, I promise you. I'm not going to be very nice and pleasant. But try to understand our views as well. So now there is a regime in Egypt which is really friendly. We share a lot of interests, which are the same interests, and trying to aim it to the right location. And the only question is, how long this regime is going to last? And Egypt has its problems as well. Egyptian soldiers are getting killed along the Libyan border, in Sinai. They proclaimed officially Hamas to be an enemy, because Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood basically. It's amazing, but the whole conflict in the Middle East is shifting now. It's no longer Israel on one side and the Arabs on the other side. It's Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, PLO on one side, and some on the other side. That's new. As we said, everything is changing. The main concern that we have is how long this regime is going to last. If it stays like that for 30 years, well, we are content. Like in the days of the judges. And the land rested for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Well, give us 40 years of peace. And then we can dedicate all of our resources to build more and to grow more and to develop more. Have you any idea what else we can accomplish in my country? If we had the resources, we have accomplished quite a lot. Some of you have been there to see. So that's a question. Moving next to Jordan. Jordan is another country that we have peace with since 1994. Ruled by a king by the name of Abdullah II, friends of Israel. But like any other Arab country in the region, or most of them, the regime only represents about 25 to 30% of the people. The others are Palestinians that got there as refugees, most of them. So we have a regime that doesn't represent what the people want. It represents the regime. And we are working vis-a-vis King Abdullah and his cabinet. Jordan is a key player, as many others. There were some reports a few weeks ago that some people of ISIS went to the city of Ma'an, which is in Jordan, and they took the town over for about a day or two, just recruiting some locals to come and join them, and went back into the desert. Maybe false reports, I'm not really sure. But Jordan is a key player because of one main reason. When the US had left Iraq, it created a continuous area, if you wish, of Shiites. And since we speak about the Muslim motivation now, there's a free passage from Iran through southern Iraq, and keep in mind, Iraq today, nobody controls anything, and through Jordan, straight to Israel's borders. If Jordan is not there under its current regime, Iranian troops have access all the way to 20 miles away from Jerusalem. Do you understand that? And therefore, if Jordan collapses, that's one of very few scenarios that we will see American boots on the ground, yes, and also Israeli boots on the ground on Jordanian soil. And this is quite a concern, because Iran will have a free access. This is an Israeli tank. I couldn't find a picture from Iranian tanks, just to show you, right, the threat. And the king of Jordan is already accused by the Muslims. How dare you to be the last shield to protect Israel? You're a traitor. You should let free passage to Iranian troops if they so want to. So Jordan, still stable, not totally restful, but not too bad. It's interesting, but the Arab monarchies are doing much better than all the others. Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. Because the way they see that the king is Allah's chosen, and you hesitate to rebel against Allah's chosen, you will rebel against a dictator, a military general, but a king has much more significance. So things are not too bad so far, but that can change within minutes. Moving north to maybe the most intriguing place, and that's Syria. Bashar al-Assad, the new president, when he was made president, his father died in 2000, there were so many hopes. He's an eye doctor. He was trained in London. He knows the West. He knows internet, people said. He's going to bring some liberalization to Syria. Syria is going to change forever. How do we say in America? Duh. No. Things were getting actually worse and worse. That wasn't really working. The Assad regime under Bashar is even worse than under Hafez, his father. But Syria is a complicated issue because of a few reasons. The ethnic factor. Syria is made of few ethnic groups that only sharing Syrian identity because France created Syria as they wanted. The Alawites, which are making the regime, number about 2.5 million people, about 10% of the population. They rule the country with an iron fist. They have most of the important positions, especially in the army. See, some people said, well, just a minute, why doesn't he get on the plane and go someplace? As other leaders did, the president of Tunisia, that's how he saved his life, or the president of Yemen. Things are getting wrong, you get on the plane and somebody will host you. He can't. If he leaves, 2.5 million people in Syria, the Alawites, will be massacred by the Sunnis, no doubt. 1982, his father, Hafez, there was no internet back then, and not even CNN. Things were done without the world even noticing. Moved into the city of Hama in northern Syria and butchered between 30 to 40,000 Muslim Brotherhood members. These are the people that make today the Free Syrian Army. These are the people that seek revenge. So if Assad is leaving, the whole Alawite group is going to be wiped out. He's not fighting only for himself. He represents a large group of people, and you know what? Everybody predicted he's going to be thrown off, going to lose. Well, he's holding on, and not well. Holding on quite well. Although he's not controlling the country anymore. But he still have enough troops and enough strength to maintain some control over some area. And then you have the Sunnis and you have the Kurds. By the way, the Kurds may be the big winners of this situation. Maybe finally the Kurds will have their own country. The largest minority in the world without a state, 20 million people. Muslims, Sunni Muslims, moderate, we have to say, Sunni Muslims, and by the way, friends of Israel. How interesting. The Kurds are friends of Israel. So maybe the one positive outcome, once again, from my selfish perspective, will be a Kurdish state. The problem is it will cover areas from Syria, Iraq. The largest minority in the world without a state, 20 million people. Muslims, Sunni Muslims, moderate, we have to say, Sunni Muslims, and by the way, friends of Israel. How interesting. The Kurds are friends of Israel. So maybe the one positive outcome, once again, from my selfish perspective, will be a Kurdish state. The problem is it will cover areas from Syria, Iraq, and Turkey will never let it happen. So maybe a smaller Kurdish state that only has the Kurds of Syria and Iraq and not those in Turkey. Turkey will never let the Kurds to have their own state, of course, because that means Turkish territory. So we have groups and ethnic groups which are making the Syrian opposition. And once the war started in Syria, and it started the way it was supposed to start, if I may say so, because it was indeed, we spoke about a genuine resistance, rebellion of Syrians that wanted to see the end of the Assad regime. You see what's on the screen over there, which is not that important, so please allow me to run this one through, and we'll speak once again about the Syrian regime. It all started in March of 2011. It was Syrians rebelling against the regime. But soon after that, because the regime retaliated so brutally, that soldiers from the army started defecting. And they made the Free Syrian Army. We speak about military personnel that hated to see what the regime does to Syrians. And whole hell broke loose into the chaos. Who stepped in? Everybody, basically. Everybody who calls himself a Sunni and was unemployed and was looking for some adventures and was paid the right amount of money, made his way into Syria. Fighting who? Not very clear. We thought that the regime, but no, they were fighting predominantly one another. At that step, the US and Britain started to show some interest. Totally confused. Who are we going to support here? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Let me remind you. The US and the West were supporting the Taliban and the Mujahideen to stop the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1980-81. Look what happened now. The US and Iraq were close allies in the Iraq-Iran war. Look what happened later. When do you do the right thing? And can you plan for a long term when everything changes so frequently? Well, if you knew how the Middle East was made and what are the local sentiments, that should help a little bit. Because few things don't change. So what we see in Syria today, Hezbollah from Lebanon is helping the regime of the Syrians. China, Russia, behind the regime. And the first time that the world was kind of waking up to say, just a minute, something is wrong, is when we had some reports that the regime is using chemical weapons. They can kill each other by the hundreds of thousands. We don't care. But using chemical weapons, oh, just a minute now. That's dangerous. So suddenly the West showed some interest to disarm the Assad regime from using chemical weapons. By the way, only last week, they reported that everything that the Syrians declared that they have was destroyed. Did they declare everything that they have? Go figure. So Syria is not what it used to be. If you look at the map over there, most likely we're going to see some new entities. In what way, in what shape and form, that's really hard to tell. But let me ask you this. When the West is going to go into Syria, Iraq to take ISIS out, and that mission will be accomplished, what's next? Because you can say, listen, I can see in my wild dreams a conference, maybe in Paris, France, nice place, that you have Western delegates, you have the local Arab tribes and all these entities, and you decide who is going to have what. Repeating the same mistake of Britain and France from 1922. That's how it's going to, otherwise we accomplish nothing. You go inside, you take some people out, now what? Confused? Of course we are. Everybody is confused. But according to all kinds of reports, the United Nations is the source behind those figures and numbers. We speak about a tragedy. We speak about a big human tragedy. For some reason, it didn't catch the attention of the world. By the way, when was the last Muslim demonstration for what happens in Syria in Paris or in London? They only go out to the streets by the tens of thousands when Palestinians are killed by the state of Israel. So just a minute now. If human lives matter, I would expect them to go and demonstrate against the Assad regime. No, that's okay, that's our problem. But if you dare to take one of us out, oh, we will not tolerate that. Forgive me for saying so, that's anti-Semitism. If the world is criticizing Israel for killing Palestinians and is willing to inflict sanctions, and the world doesn't do the same to Russia when they kill Chechens, etc., forgive me for saying that, anti-Semitism. At least the way that I see that, all right? Thank you. I would like to say a word about Erdogan. Now that's interesting. He adopted the same system as Putin in Russia. He was the prime minister, now he's the president. You just need to change a little bit, make some amendments to the constitution. You never leave, you just take different offices. So he's now the president. And he said, loud and clear, he's dreaming about the reinstitution of the Ottoman Empire. A member of NATO, that said already, I'm not going to let this coalition that's going to fight ISIS to use Turkish bases, to cross Turkish territory, or to use any Turkish assets. All right? That's the position of Turkey. And the reason why he's so angry, and the reason why he speaks about, once again, the Ottoman Empire, is because the Europeans decided not to have Turkey as a member of the EU. For about 20 years, Turkey tried. They did whatever Europe demanded, all kinds of amendments and changes in the constitution, and finally Europe said, we don't want you. Well, you tell me why the Christian continent will have 80 million Muslims as part of the EU. He feels humiliated as well. One way to restore the honor of the Muslim people is to say, okay, you don't want us? We'll do it ourselves. The problem is that every ambition that he has will clash directly with Iran. As we said, maybe what we see is Iran and Turkey fighting for hegemony in the Middle East. It's also possible. And then come ISIS. I know that this is taking the whole attention now, and ever since I'm here, that's what I hear. Today I just heard some radio. What's his name? Phil Valentine, am I right? Or somebody like that? Okay. That's all they spoke about, ISIS. And you can tell there was a lot of interest. And I was asking, why now? Once again, excuse me, I don't mean to be brutal. Because of the beheadings? That's what brought ISIS to the table? Well, Hamas was executing people in the streets of Gaza. And nobody made a big deal out of it. So what's the urgency? Well, you see, we're not surprised. We know about ISIS. We know what they do. But when we try to tell all the others, listen, this is going to be a global problem. Leave us alone. Now we can get the world's attention. Now we can. We speak about a group that was part of Al-Qaeda. Basically, they were operating in Iraq. That was Al-Qaeda Iraq. When most of Al-Qaeda fled to Afghanistan, Pakistan, that was the branch of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And over some disagreements, they decided to separate about a year ago. And today ISIS is in a competition with Al-Qaeda. And guess what? If you want to get more support, you need to prove yourself. Well, who is going to be supportive of Al-Qaeda when they did not carry out any real operation for a long time? And then you have ISIS cutting heads every now and then. Ooh, they represent us. They are the heroes. And then you go to the marketplaces in Istanbul and you find some people that are unemployed and you offer them $150 a day. Come and fight for Islam. They'll go. These are the heroes. They are beheading all the others. We want to join them. What kind of a mindset is that? What kind of a sick way of thinking? Guys, that's the way it is. And to make it more horrible, Americans are going as well. And British and French. And how disappointing. You were thinking, so is everybody, not you, but we speak about people that accommodated those Muslim immigrants, that they're going to be part of our society. We basically invited them. They enjoy our hospitality. Now they are turning against us? Ooh, we are so offended. How dare you? If you have open eyes and you see what happens in mosques in Europe, you should not be surprised. That's what the imams are teaching most of the time. They just enjoy the hospitality. They enjoy the freedom. They will use democracy once to overtake it, and then democracy is gone. So suddenly ISIS is the wake-up call for Europe. We speak about a group of people that have a very radical view of Islam, very successful in what they do, simply exploiting the disintegration of two regimes and two countries. There is a vast space in northern Iraq and northern Syria that nobody controls. Easy to take. In this area, rich oil fields, 50% of the Syrian gas reservoirs, some big cities that nobody is protecting. Come and take. ISIS is selling fuel every day and makes a profit of $6 million. They seized banks in the city of Mosul, the second largest city in Iraq, took the money, and they established what they call an Islamic State. So their goal is to create a caliphate, officially announced in June this year. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is the new caliph, anyhow. We'll be on the screen over there in just a minute. And he made a fatwa. Fatwa is kind of a religious order. All the Muslims in the world should submit to my authority or they will be killed. Plain and simple. That's how it works. I'm surprised that the American administration did not say, we're going to negotiate with ISIS. I mean, you want us to negotiate with Hamas, all right? But you're not negotiating. What's the difference? Excuse me for getting real emotional here, but that's for a reason. So, when we speak about ISIS, once again, we need to understand their ideology. And they say, and we need to give it to their credit, they're not interested yet to turn against the West. Right now, the main issue, the main goal is to convert the Muslims to the version of Islam that they follow. Right now, that's what they basically aspire for. The next step will be, of course, to carry Muhammad's words, if you wish, all right, or Islam to the rest of the world. And by the way, they're very kind. If you want to live in the Islamic State as a Christian and a Jew, you can. You always could, by the way. But you are a dhimmi. A dhimmi means a second-class citizen. and you pay the most humiliating tax called jizya, simply a tax because you're not a Muslim. That's what you're paying. So they're not going to kill you, they're going to kill pagans, other Muslims. Jews and Christians also have the books, all right, the scriptures, they said, have the right to live. And as they said many times, only under Islam, the Jews and the Christians can be really free. That's their view. So, speaking about ISIS, I think that we covered at least this area. And the question is, again, not why we are so alarmed, but who benefits from all the chaos in the region? And you do understand that few groups are interested to see as much unrest as possible. Of course, Iran is always interested to see unrest in the area. That always helps them. But as we said, all these third groups as well, we cover that as well. And now the world is going to respond. And President Obama said 2 weeks ago, the US doesn't have a strategy yet. Well, now there is a strategy. And the idea is to form a coalition. Anybody who wants to join in is welcome, except for one country. Who wants to guess which one this is? Israel. Not invited in, and that's all right. We don't want to go to such coalition. We have enough problems. But the question is, who is going to be in the coalition? To remind you, the American policy is and was, we want to cooperate with the moderate Muslims to fight the militant Muslims. Which means that we need to find somebody that will be troops on the ground, and somebody suggested the Kurds. Well, they will, the Kurds will. But the Kurds have no intention to expand, to conquer land or to free land in Iraq. They're limited to a certain area. They want to have the country. They're not interested in conquest. Now, fighting ISIS, it's not on Kurdish territory. It's in Iraq and Syria. Why would the Kurds even consider to join such an adventure? They will not. And then somebody brought up the idea, well, what about the Sunni tribes in Iraq that we cooperated with? Because it took some time to the US to understand, if you want to defeat terror in Iraq, you don't work with the government. You're going down to the level of the Sunni tribes. You talk to the leaders, and they will fight with you, and they did. They defeated Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And then what the US did, leaving Iraq, giving the power to who? The Shiites. Now you tell me why the Sunni leaders will ever consider to side with America to be boots on the ground. So when you want to recruit boots on the ground, there are none. Egypt said, we are not part of it. Jordan said, leave us alone. Turkey said, you're not even crossing our territory. So who are the boots on the ground that's supposed to take out ISIS? And let's say that somebody will volunteer and will take ISIS out. Now what? That's the main question. And as I said, some questions just don't have answers. Quite a problem. Well, let's go to the second part of the presentation, if I may. We'll do that briefly. The clock is ticking. Please read the screen, and we speak about the Israeli-Palestinian/Hamas issue now. And you tell me, what would you do? Here is the given situation. All right, I'm not exaggerating, that's the way it is. That's our situation with Hamas in Gaza. What would you do? We have neighbors. They tell us day and night they're going to destroy us, accumulating weapons like nobody ever before. And then they open fire. What would you do? The easy answer, we're going to take them out, right? So easy. Oh, just a minute now. The world has something to say. How dare you to kill innocent civilians? Well, let me ask you something. If you're a teacher in a school, that's your job. But in your house, in the bunker, for money, you let Hamas to hide some rockets. Are you an innocent civilian, yes or no? It's a dilemma. It's a dilemma which is very hard to answer. You just wanted to make some money. The situation in Gaza is really bad. And they offered you some, shekels. By the way, they use Israeli currency in Gaza. All right? Are you an innocent civilian? Because we know that there was a bunker there. Do we have the right to take it out? Well, some will say yes, some will say no. I understand the confusion. We are struggling with these issues all the time. We are spending a fortune to develop rockets that will be as precise as possible in order to minimize collateral damage. The other side is using rockets that are spread out to take as many lives as possible. One party plays by the rule, the other one doesn't care about the rules. And who gets criticized? The one that plays by the rules. How frustrating. So that's a given situation that we are facing, and without too much history, just to show you what are we talking about. A very small area, maybe the most crowded place on earth. 1.8 million people live in an area which is about 25 by 6 miles. Gaza City is in the center, and the place is not a pleasant place to be at. We need to be honest about it, not pleasant. Part of the fault is ours, but most of it is actually theirs. Who is Hamas? Well, that's easy. When you go home, just Google Hamas charter. You know, when you write a document, like a proclamation of independence, and you want to tell the world who you are, you speak about yourself. We are seeking freedom. We want to build. No. Hamas's charter is kill, 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 slaughter, slaughter, hatred, hatred. That's how they represent themselves. And we better believe them because they mean it. We speak about a group that rules over Gaza, some will say, against the will of the people. But every survey that was taken in Gaza, there is a majority of people who are supporting Hamas. So you tell me, what does it mean to be an innocent civilian in such an area? The structure is not that important, so allow me to run that through. 2005, Israel still occupied Gaza, and I'm saying that on purpose, the term occupation. And then we decided to leave the area. How many times you heard the slogan recently, Free Gaza? How many of you think that there are Israeli troops on Gaza's soil? Can I see your hands? That Israel still occupies Gaza? Nobody? Well, that's the most pleasant surprise that I had all week. Because when I check with people, everybody thinks that Israel occupies Gaza. Everybody speaks about Free Gaza. We are not in Gaza for 9 years now. Since September 1st of 2005, Israel pulled out of Gaza. And we did it, by the way, because we thought, you know what? The world is telling us that if we just give up a little bit more to the Palestinians, it will bring peace to the region. We said, really? Let's see. There were some other reasons, of course. We pulled out from Gaza. What did we get in return? 14,000 rockets were raining on Israeli towns ever since. 14,000. Some very primitive, some more sophisticated. You should see kids going to school because they usually fire at 7:45 a.m. That's when the kids go to school, and they know whenever the siren goes on, they have 15 seconds to run for their lives. And you see them running. What can you do in 15 seconds or a lot? When you're running for your life, you can set the world record. But you see them, and this is daily life. And nobody even says, this is insane. Nobody should live like that. It's just part of life. We are used to that. Hey, no big deal. It's a huge deal. But we are used to that. Think about something similar here, huh? So we pulled out from Gaza, and we were hoping to get something in return that wasn't really working. And right after pulling out from Gaza, the Palestinians had elections. Hamas won. The PLO, the moderate ones, refuses to surrender the weapons or the power, which led to a civil war in the Palestinian side between Hamas and PLO. Who won? Hamas. So now we have a nation called the Palestinians that want to have a state divided to two entities already, fighting against each other. If you want to add stability to the Middle East, that's how you add stability. A nation that doesn't have a country yet is at a civil war. And they want to have a state. So Hamas is ruling over Gaza. And since Hamas said, we are not going to keep any of the agreements that Israel had signed with the PLO already, we are committed for the destruction of Israel, we proclaimed Hamas as a terror entity. And you tell me, why should I send to my enemy's camp food, water, electricity, fuel, medication? We do all the time. You show me another example in world history. The two parties went to a war, and one supplied the enemy with everything they need, except for weapons and ammunition. Never happened. We don't want any credit for it. We hate to see people starve to death to Gaza. Part of it is our fault, but most of it, not our fault. But you always keep taking those responsibilities, because that's who we are. And we don't need any credit for that. Here are the three key players, and with your permission, I'm not going to focus on them because the clock is ticking. Let me tell you how Hamas operates. And once again, it's not exaggerating. It's not propaganda. We speak about a group of people that are using all the resources that the population in Gaza has, not to build schools, not to provide decent medical care, not to improve the economy, to buy weapons, to build bunkers, to dig tunnels, because the main objective is not the well-being of the people, but the destruction of Israel. It's on the table. They don't hide their intentions. We need to give them that much. They're very honest about that. We just refuse to listen. Just talking. No. They mean it. And they do that. And every now and then we have another round of violence. It's like a stupid game that never ends. And that's the motivation. That is the given. This is not going to change. Things may change. Few things will happen. This thing is not going to change. As long as the state of Israel exists, I say it for the fourth time, the Muslim world will never, ever accept the existence of a Jewish state in the midst of Muslim holy territories. They call it, you know why? Because our existence is proving that something was wrong with the Quran, something is wrong with the Muslim existence. They were supposed to be victorious. They're not. All right, speaking about the blockade around Gaza. And this is always, the world is using that against us. They are so poor, they are so hungry. We'll read the articles of journalists from Egypt, if you can see that visited Gaza and were shocked. Brand new hotels and holiday villages, supermarkets full of everything they need, prices cheaper than in Egypt. It's not me. Egyptian newspapers, you can check it. It's very easy. And by the way, don't we have the right to control what goes into Gaza? And we said, listen, everything that goes into Gaza goes through Israel. We're going to confiscate weapons, confiscate ammunition, the rest can go. And the world said, how dare you? So they appointed a committee, the United Nations, which is not Friends of Israel. It was called the Palmer Committee. And this committee was investigating, and they came to a shocking conclusion. By international law, Israel has the right to have such a blockade. Now, that was a problem here because that was not what the UN expected. So at least we are covered in that regard. When you have somebody next to you and tells you, I'm going to destroy you, you have the right to check what goes into their territory. That's how the Gaza area looks like. The main players, of course, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, any other name that you want to use. And let's get a little closer to our conclusion and speak about the last conflict. That was something that we knew that may happen. We knew that Hamas is digging tunnels under the borders. We did not know where and how many. We knew that the tunnels that came in from Egypt were all destroyed by the Egyptians. The Egyptians will not tolerate a strong Hamas existence in Gaza, not anymore. So these assault tunnels were dug for one reason, to send through them hundreds of Hamas terrorists to come underground into Israeli communities to kill as many people possible. Now, we did not have the justification to go and look for them because things were quiet for a while. About half a year ago, Hamas and PLO signed an agreement of a unity government. What was the motivation of Hamas? They are bankrupt. They wanted the PLO to pay the salaries of the Hamas officials. The PLO refused to do that. They said, if we are going to pay your salaries, the world will accuse us that we are supporting terror. We don't want to do that. PLO Palestinians, Hamas Palestinians. A unity government, because Hamas was losing its popularity. There were no resources. Egypt was not supplying anything to them. We supplied still food and everything, but that was it. And they said, well, maybe we cannot survive. Let the PLO take care about our needs. They refused to do that. So here's a problem to you. And you tell me what's your solution. We are losing our popularity. We still are sticking to a very militant strategy. The world forgot about us. How can we get the world's attention? Easy. Fire a rocket. Fire 2. Fire 5. Fire 1,000. The first one, we will not retaliate. Oops, a mistake, a glitch. Somebody simply fired a rocket. 5 rockets, all right. Well, still goes into the statistics of maybe a big mistake. 100 rockets, I'm sorry. Something has to be done. So the trigger for this whole conflict was the salaries of Hamas officials. They were not getting paid, and they were angry. So what do? Fire at Egypt? You cannot do that. Fire at Israel? Of course, that's what we do anyhow. We want everybody to support us. How can we get support? We are leading the struggle against Israel. The PLO, collaborators, traitors, support us. What a funny game we are playing. So there was a round of violence. And the whole world, at first interesting, supported Israel. Everybody said, Israel has the right to defend itself. Well, thank you very much. A cat has the right to defend itself. What does it mean? Are there any boundaries, any lines over there? How do you defend yourself effectively? And we tried. We tried to go after Hamas militants. It's not always doable because they are in tunnels. But I'm asking you, if the UN reports that in a UN school they stored hundreds of rockets, is that school a legitimate target? Yes or no? You fire from the courtyard of the school or the Shifa hospital in Gaza. Is that a legitimate target to take out? Not really. Not really. If you YouTube, you can find a countless number of footage of Israeli pilots live, reporting to headquarters, well, here's my target. I see some children about 50 yards away. I'm disengaging. Disengage. But if the target was there, you know how we take out such a target in an airstrike? Number one, we drop a flyer. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, we're going to bomb the building. That's enough time. I'm not kidding you. Then we make a phone call. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, don't be there. And about 5 to 2, a helicopter gunship or a drone is launching a rocket, a small one. We call it knock on the roof, just to make some noise on the roof. If now you didn't get the message and you're in the house, we'll take out the house. By the way, in many cases, Hamas people were standing out in the streets warning the people, don't leave the house. Otherwise, we'll shoot you. And then you can see dead people in the streets of Gaza. It's so outrageous. And some will say, you are a hypocrite. You could save those lives. Well, maybe I could. But we would lose lives on our side. If I have to choose who is going to lose lives, they're going to lose lives. Sorry. But once you're in the streets of Gaza and somebody fires at you from a house, you take the house out with everybody inside. Is that immoral? Maybe. I don't know. Check with your boys in Iraq and Afghanistan, what did they do? You're facing impossible situations. It's a matter of a tenth of a second to make a decision. Are you going to live or die? And if the cost is to take somebody innocent from the other side to protect your troops, you'll take them out. It's not nice. It's not nice. By the way, my office is open for suggestions. You have any idea how we can do that effectively? Please, I'm open to hear suggestions. And I promise to consider each one of them. Well, not me. You don't understand. I don't have any position anymore. So, when we speak about the things in Gaza, it's just a taste. Because you can say easily, each time that I said Hamas, you say ISIS. You're right. Each time that I said Hamas, you can say Al-Qaeda. Same thing. So when President Obama said that America has the right and it will defend its people by all means necessary, how come we cannot defend our people by all means necessary? Because we are right there. This is almost over. So please bear with me for 5 more minutes. As I said, during the war and during the conflict, we kept sending food into Gaza. So we cannot say that people that were lacking stuff. We can say that because ceasefires were violated 11 times by Hamas, the food was taken in. But if you don't open the shops, people can't go and buy food. By the way, in one ceasefire, Israeli troops were inside already, looking for those tunnels, taking shelter in homes and houses. People went back home to see what happened to the property. marking on a map which house is occupied by Israeli troops. You go across the road around the corner, and a Hamas militant waits, and you give him a piece of paper. When the ceasefire was over, they knew exactly where we are located. Do we want to have another ceasefire? It's a problem, it's a challenge. As we said, it's interesting that it's no longer Arabs against the Jews in the Middle East. The lines are really changing now. We have a lot of allies, not because we like each other, because Hamas presents a real danger in the Muslim Brotherhood to Saudi Arabia, to Egypt, to the PLO. They will not tell you loud and clear. They want Hamas to be damaged. They can't say it because of Arab solidarity. Oh, but they were very thankful for what we did. So it's interesting to see how in front of our very eyes, everything is basically changing. Well, let's bring that to conclusion with some bothering thoughts, if I may. I'm not going to speak about the media coverage. The media this time was a little more balanced, to say so. BBC was taking a very interesting position that said, just a minute, they are reporting about more than 2,000 casualties, but when you look at the ages of people, that's really weird. How come that 85% are men, only 50% women? It's supposed to be 50-50. What are we looking at? And most of these men killed are between the age of 21 and 29, the classical age of a militant. Can we really trust the figures? And by the way, everybody who died in Gaza was reported casualty, heart attacks, car crashes. Who cares about the details? And once again, I'm not saying that innocent civilians were not killed. They were, especially children. I can take some responsibility. But if you know that we are coming to take out the house, and you want the people not to leave because you're going to shoot them, some of the blood is on your hands as well. As I said, my office is open for suggestions. Tell me how to deal with such a situation, and I'm sorry to say that before not too long, when you will have troops on the ground, or maybe airstrikes, you'll do the same thing with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or the others, as you did in the past. What are the choices? Okay, and then there was a ceasefire. The ceasefire, Hamas didn't get basically anything of what they wanted. But I have to tell you, the mindset in Israel, people are frustrated. People do not understand why we did not go this extra mile to really, not maybe taking them out, but we could be much more effective. The government hesitated. Some will say very careful, very clever. The way that we see that, hesitated. And the main reason for that, because we are known for one thing. There was a problem, we are going in, we take the problem out, we're coming back. Things are changing. Israel is adopting a more defensive mindset. Everybody is praising the Iron Dome. You know what is the Iron Dome, right? A great weapon system. They scored more than 90% of success. There was no such system in the world. But it changes the mindset to be more defensive. Since the Iron Dome is working, we do not have to respond immediately. We can wait. And it's working well. I have to tell you, I had a coffee in Tel Aviv one day, and the siren went on. So you leave your coffee on the table, you go into what is marked as a safe room. After 45 seconds, you hear a boom. That's a long time, 45 seconds. You're coming out, you look up the sky, it's a little cloud. That's where the rocket intercepted the other rocket. You take some picture with your cell phone. The coffee is still hot. You go and finish your coffee. It's absolutely insane. Well, it's kind of easy to laugh about it, but think about it from another perspective. Since we are protected, there's no hurry. We'll try again, see what we can do. One step leads to another, and you cross a line that even if you want to operate, it's a little too late. So that's the downside of the Iron Dome. Well, the question is, of course, what's next and how this is going to end? That's hard to answer. Gaza is supposed to be restored. There's a lot of damage done over there. The world is willing to offer money. The question is, who will get the money? If you give it to Hamas, trust me, they will not build homes. If you want to follow every project and pay the money to the owner, well, technically, how do you do that? By the way, Qatar is going to make most of the benefit. Their money is going to restore Gaza. Almost all the others refuse to give any money because they know how the money is used. But We did not even start talking. We said, ceasefire number 1. Now we're going to go to Cairo and we're going to talk. Hamas got absolutely nothing so far. Any moment as we speak, they can say, just a minute now. We lost so many people, so much, and we got absolutely nothing. It's not over yet. That may be the case. Or maybe in 10 years' time, we look back to say, hey, that was a great success. We were able to terrify them. They were so deterred they didn't try for 10 years. Give us 10 years, that's all we need. In 2006, there was a war in Lebanon with Hezbollah. And we felt very bad about it because we did not perform well. We were not prepared for that, and we thought, well, we did a lousy job. Here we are, 8 years later, it's quiet. The leaders of Hezbollah don't dare to stick their noses outside the bunkers because we'll take them out. So it takes some time to look back and say, you know what? Wasn't that bad. Right now, we feel frustrated because there was an opportunity. The world climate was there. ISIS is helping us in that regard. We say, listen, if you're going to fight them, let us finish the job here. But we didn't. So we'll wait and see. And this is not a very optimistic message. But let me guarantee to you the following. We all know how the book ends. And we all know why we are there. And there was always a price to pay to be Jewish. It's a price to pay to be Israeli. We are willing to pay the price. What are the alternatives? Where else we can go? My generation is between the founding fathers of the state. Looking at my kids, there was quite a bridge between the two. But people like myself, and I represent the whole generation here, it's an honor to be able to live in times to say, we lived to see prophecies being fulfilled. We live to see God regathering his people back to the country. Won't be easy. And if we need to pay the price, we'll pay the price. Is it going to be a global problem? Is America will be involved? Is Britain is going to come to the rescue? Is Germany going to send troops? I don't care. Once again, I'm being selfish. We have a nation to protect. We have a nation to make sure that exists, and we are there to stay. So as long as it will take, maybe we shall live by the sword for many years to come. It's a possibility. If that's the price to pay to be free, and how many people died for the freedom of America? Many. And we didn't see the end of it yet. If that's a price to pay, we are happy to pay the price. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Now, if you'll get your outlines out. Wow, he gave you something to think about, something we can pray about. It's our privilege to pray for not just the peace of Jerusalem, but for the people of the land. And Ronnie may return to his apartment in Jerusalem, but we will not forget them. I think the best single line of advice I have, and I'll close with this. Dr. Moshe Sharon was here about a year ago, and someone asked him what we could do. And his response came very quickly. He said, fight for your culture. So my prayer is that we will not take our freedom and liberty for granted, nor assume that it is free nor cheap, because it has come to us at a very high cost. Amen? Amen. I thank you for your patience. You were wonderful listeners tonight. You honored our friend, and I trust God will honor our prayers. God bless you.
Britain is going to come to the rescue. Is Germany going to send troops? I don't care. Once again, I'm being selfish. We have a nation to protect. We have a nation to make sure that exists, and we are there to stay. So as long as it will take, maybe we shall live by the sword for many years to come. It's a possibility. If that's the price to pay to be free, and how many people died for the freedom of America? Many. And we didn't see the end of it yet.